The first moments for many Americans arriving in Canada often feel like stepping into a quieter, slightly refracted version of the country they left behind. Everything seems familiar: storefronts, road signs, conversations. The language is still English, the cars drive on the right, and the cities are laid out in patterns that make sense. But the mood is different, subtly but undeniably. Airports are a good place to sense it first. In Toronto or Vancouver, the bilingual signage whispers a quiet reminder that this is a dual-language country. French appears alongside English on every sign, every announcement. It's not just translation, it's presence. A reminder that Canada's identity is shared. People move with a gentler rhythm. There's less urgency in their steps, fewer loud phone calls in public spaces. Even in crowded terminals, the energy feels softer. Staff apologize with sincerity. Customs officers are efficient but unhurried. It's not the false smile of customer service, but something more restrained, more genuine. For Americans accustomed to a direct, energetic tone, this first contrast can be disorienting. Not unwelcome, but certainly unfamiliar. Outside, the shift continues. Canadian cities don't shout. They hum. Traffic obeys in a way that feels cooperative, not just enforced. Drivers wave thank you after merging. Pedestrians step into crosswalks with a surprising sense of trust. The streets aren't quieter because they're empty. They're quieter because people speak in tones that respect the space around them. It's not silence, it's calm. The physical environment often adds to the adjustment. The air, especially in winter, bites differently. Colder, yes, but drier. And Canadians walk through it prepared, layered with purpose. Children in snow pants walk to school without complaint. Coffee shops like Tim Hortons aren't just chains, they're communal pauses in the day, places where construction workers, retirees, and young professionals all converge without friction. It's more than coffee, it's ritual. The money surprises people next. Polymer bills in bold colors feel like monopoly currency at first. They don't crumple, they snap, they shimmer slightly in the light, and the numbers, liters instead of gallons, kilometers instead of miles, create a quiet disorientation. Even familiar items in a grocery store feel subtly altered. Milk comes in bags in some provinces. Food packaging bears bilingual labels, calorie counts, and a firmer tone around environmental responsibility. Reusable bags aren't a suggestion, they're expected. Forgetting one isn't just inconvenient, it's gently frowned upon. And then there's the social layer. For many Americans, the contrast in communication style is immediate. Conversations in Canada begin more cautiously. People don't leap into storytelling or humor right away. There's warmth, but it's veiled in modesty. Kindness is extended through restraint, not exuberance. Holding the door for someone is standard, but so is waiting patiently without small talk. The national temperament leans toward understated respect rather than expressive friendliness. Over time, it becomes clear. This is a culture where being non-imposing is a form of courtesy. Even hospitality feels different. A Canadian neighbor might shovel your driveway without ever ringing the bell. A stranger might offer directions with sincerity, then disappear without expecting thanks. These moments, while brief, form a pattern that speaks to an unspoken ethos: help, but don't hover; include, but don't overwhelm. It's an emotional balance that reveals itself slowly. For Americans used to a culture that values expressiveness, speed, and visibility, this new tone can feel like someone turned the volume down. But in the quiet, something deeper emerges, a sense that social life here is governed by shared space, not individual assertion. That community is woven from small, continuous gestures rather than bold declarations. And that belonging in Canada comes not from standing out, but from standing with. Grocery stores are often where the deeper cultural contrasts begin to unfold. What at first seems like a familiar task becomes a lesson in adaptation. Pricing is in kilograms, not pounds. Milk and gas are measured in liters, and then there's the checkout process. No baggers, no automatic offer of plastic. Canadians bring their own bags or pay extra for them, a reflection of environmental policies that aren't debated loudly, just followed quietly. Even the pace at the register feels different. Cashiers greet you, make small comments, and take their time without urgency. No one in line seems impatient. For Americans used to transactional speed, it's not just slower, it's more human. Politeness is not surface level here, it's systemic. It flows through every interaction like background music. People thank the bus driver. They say sorry even when they're not at fault. The words are not transactional. They're cultural habits rooted in a collective desire to smooth social friction. This doesn't mean Canadians are less direct or lack opinions. It means that confrontation is managed with restraint. Volume is moderated. Even disagreements tend to arrive wrapped in courtesy. Public transportation reinforces the pattern. Subways and buses move efficiently but quietly. People queue without reminders. There's less chatter, fewer loud phone calls, and more regard for personal space. In the US, public spaces often carry an undercurrent of tension, as if everyone is fending off intrusions. In Canada, there's a shared understanding. Presence doesn't equal disruption. That collective mindset even shapes how cities feel. Downtown Toronto or Montreal during rush hour hums with life, but never erupts. The volume remains dialed back. Winter amplifies these differences. It's not just a season, it's a cultural force. Snow doesn't shut things down. It activates rituals. Shovels line porches like winter sentries. Salt trucks work through the night, often unnoticed but essential. And people don't complain endlessly about the cold. They prepare for it. They dress for it. Children walk to school wrapped like explorers. Adults commute with thermoses and thick boots. There's a shared resilience, unspoken and expected. Where Americans might vent frustration at bad weather, Canadians internalize it, adapt, and move forward. The season doesn't provoke drama. It builds quiet strength. Social dynamics reflect that same ethos of low-drama resilience. Friendships form slowly but genuinely. Coworkers might not invite you out immediately, but they'll offer help without being asked. A neighbor might clear the snow from your sidewalk without ever saying a word. This isn't performative generosity, it's habitual consideration. For Americans accustomed to a more open and enthusiastic style of interaction, the reserve can initially feel like distance, but in time it reveals itself as a deeper, more consistent form of kindness. Even professional environments echo this rhythm. Canadian workplaces emphasize work-life balance in ways that still feel aspirational to many Americans. Meetings start on time, but don't overflow with power plays. Success isn't broadcast as loudly. Modesty is admired more than ambition. Bragging, even subtly, is culturally discouraged. Instead, achievements are quietly acknowledged, often with communal support rather than individual spotlight. People take their vacation days, they leave the office without guilt, and no one wears overwork as a badge of honor. One of the subtler shocks for many Americans is the absence of constant self-promotion. In Canada, competence is often communicated through action rather than declaration. Whether in school, work, or community life, the pressure to stand out is less intense. It doesn't mean there's no competition, only that it's tempered by a social contract that values equality over elevation. This affects how people dress, how they speak, even how they celebrate. A promotion might be shared with a few friends over drinks, not broadcast on social media with hashtags and humble brags. And perhaps that's the thread running through every first impression, the absence of performance. Canadians do not present themselves with the same force Americans often expect. There's an ease in how they relate to others, an assumption that people deserve respect by default, not after proving themselves. And in that quiet confidence, many Americans find something surprising, a mirror held up to their own pace, expectations, and unspoken habits. Canada does not insist on change, it invites reflection, and that can be far more powerful. Over time, that initial sense of contrast begins to seep into deeper emotional terrain. Many Americans start to notice a change not only in how they move through the world, but in how they feel inside it. There's less ambient stress, less performance, more space, both physical and emotional. In cities like Ottawa or Halifax, even during the rush of weekday mornings, there's a rhythm that seems designed not to overwhelm. The air feels more breathable. Strangers are quietly kind, and perhaps most surprisingly, there's a cultural permission to slow down without shame. This redefinition of pace subtly shifts one's internal compass. Work still matters here, but it's rarely the centerpiece of identity. Job titles carry less weight in conversation. Vacations are taken, not postponed. And when a Canadian says they're heading to the cottage, it's not a luxury, it's a routine. Escaping into nature isn't a break from life, it's part of life. Weekends are protected, not invaded by unchecked ambition. Even high-achieving professionals often downplay their status, choosing instead to talk about family, hiking trips, or the local hockey team. These lifestyle differences gradually transform expectations. In the US, productivity is so deeply woven into daily existence that stepping away from it can feel like failure. But in Canada, balance is not seen as weakness. It's a kind of wisdom. Success is measured less by output and more by well-being. The quality of one's relationships, the ability to disconnect, the presence of mental clarity, these are the markers of a good life. And this reframing is not preached. It's modeled gently every day. That shift in values seeps into social policies too. Healthcare becomes a subtle but profound presence. For Americans who are used to anxiety around medical costs, the Canadian system feels almost surreal. There are imperfections, of course, long wait times, bureaucracy, but the absence of financial panic when someone gets sick is deeply grounding. Parents can take children to the doctor without calculating the cost. A broken wrist is an inconvenience, not a financial crisis, and that security shapes how people approach risk, time off, even everyday decisions. Safety, too, plays a quiet role in shaping perception. In many Canadian cities, there's a baseline sense of public trust that can feel striking. Children take public transport. People walk home at night with less fear. It's not a utopia, but the social climate is less charged, less guarded. That subtle layer of confidence, of being part of a society that values collective responsibility, makes daily life feel a little less defensive. It allows for more generosity, more softness, and a different kind of independence. All of this gradually builds into something deeper than culture shock. It becomes a reorientation of how life is supposed to feel. For Americans raised on urgency, efficiency, and self-assertion, this environment quietly challenges the narrative. It says, you don't have to dominate to succeed, you don't have to win every interaction, and you certainly don't have to measure your worth by exhaustion. That can be a difficult shift. At first, the quiet may feel like silence. The politeness may feel like distance. The reserved smiles and slow conversations may be misread as coldness. But in time, many Americans come to see them as something else entirely. Dignity. A cultural refusal to impose. A deep belief in personal space, not just physical, but emotional. And once that is understood, a sense of belonging often begins to bloom. The most powerful moments tend to be the smallest. Someone helping push a car out of the snow without speaking. A stranger at a train station offering directions without waiting for thanks. A neighbor quietly clearing your walkway during a storm. These aren't grand gestures, they're cultural reflexes, not meant to impress, but to support. And they happen not because someone's watching, but because it's what's done. Canada doesn't demand transformation from its newcomers. It doesn't ask them to change who they are, but it does, in its quiet consistency, offer a different way of being, a slower, softer rhythm, a lifestyle built less on declaration and more on shared decency, and that shift, once internalized, becomes hard to unlearn. When Americans return home after time in Canada, the difference is felt immediately. Everything seems louder, faster, sharper, the honking is more frequent, the conversations more aggressive, the kindness more guarded. And in that contrast, the Canadian way of life reveals itself not as quaint, but as quietly radical, because it challenges the idea that progress must be loud, that strength must be shown, and that life must be earned through strain. It suggests instead that civility is strength, that peace is powerful, and that a culture built on quiet cooperation can create something rare, emotional safety.